Welcome to Femme Fantasy, where transformation, elegance, and self-discovery come to life. The registry hall was darker now, lit only by the dying sun slanting through the high windows. Shadows stretched across the stone floor like chains, and the murmurs of the gathered witnesses hushed as the panel returned. My stomach churned. The bracelet on my wrist felt heavier than it ever had before. Mistress gripped my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Jonah stood on my other side, jaw clenched, his body trembling with rage and fear. Mrs. Kettle clutched her basket to her chest like a shield, whispering words I could not hear. And across the hall, Veron waited, his case of gold still on the table, his smile faint and cruel. The head registrar cleared her throat. Both petitions have been considered. Both meet the technical requirements of escrow and sponsorship. The panel's task was to decide which best ensures stability, dignity, and order. Her eyes swept the room, pausing on me for a long moment before moving on. My heart pounded so loud it drowned her words. In recognition of the sponsor's good faith, the community pledges, and the diligence of the patron, she continued, this panel rules in favor of Mistress Alira's petition. Mistress exhaled sharply, tears springing to her eyes. Jonah let out a cry of triumph, fists raised. Mrs. Kettle dropped her basket and clasped her hands in prayer. For a brief, shimmering instant, the air was full of relief, full of freedom. But the registrar's quill struck the page again. However, the panel also recognizes Mr. Veron's substantial offer and the precedent his patronage carries. The ruling is therefore conditional. The maid shall be placed under probationary liberty, subject to review in 6 months' time. Should misconduct, instability, or lack of proper conduct be observed, the petition may be revoked and the rival claim reconsidered. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. 6 months. My freedom was not mine, it was on loan, fragile as glass. Veron rose slowly, his smile unbroken. Conditional, he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. A leash made of paper, but a leash all the same. Mistress pulled me into her arms, whispering fiercely, "We won. Don't listen to him, we won." But I could feel in her voice that even she understood the truth. The battle was not over. It had only shifted ground. As we left the hall, the townsfolk whispered. Some congratulated us, others cast doubtful glances. The sun had set, and the street lamps burned dimly, but in every shadow, I thought I saw Veron's smile waiting. 6 months. 6 months to prove I was worthy of freedom. 6 months to resist the pull of his gold, his power, his gaze. The clock had begun to tick. The night air was thick with autumn chill as we returned to Mistress's house. Lanterns glowed softly in the windows, and the smell of lavender drifted from the hearth, but the warmth of home felt strangely fragile, like a fragile porcelain cup about to slip from trembling hands. Mistress removed her cloak and sank into the chair by the fire without speaking. Her eyes were red from crying, yet her jaw was set firm. Jonah paced the room, restless energy sparking off him like firecrackers. Mrs. Kettle brewed tea in silence, her hands steady, though her lips whispered prayers under her breath. And me. I stood in the doorway, unsure whether to step further inside or vanish altogether. The ruling still echoed in my ears. Free but not free. Safe but not safe. A servant of Mistress, but also a shadow under Veron's watch. Mistress finally broke the silence. We won, but it was not the victory I wanted. 6 months of scrutiny is no victory at all. It means we must be perfect. Every gesture, every task, every glance of yours must be beyond reproach. Her eyes turned to me, sharp as glass. Do you understand? There will be no mistakes. I swallowed, nodding quickly, though my throat felt like stone. Jonah stopped pacing and slammed his fist against the wall. It's a trap. That's what it is. They gave him the back door to slither in later. He'll watch every move, waiting for the smallest slip. And the town. Half of them believe his gold could have fixed the roads, built the schools. They'll be ready to blame you for anything. Mrs. Kettle carried the teapot to the table, her voice calm but firm. Then we must leave no room for blame. The girl will serve with grace and diligence, just as she always has. The town will see her worth with their own eyes. And if Veyron lurks in the shadows, so be it. Shadows cannot smother light forever. Her words soothed me more than I expected, though fear still clawed inside. 6 months felt like a mountain I had to climb barefoot, with Veyron's gaze fixed on every step. That night, as I lay in the narrow bed upstairs, the bracelet pressed cold against my skin. I traced its shape in the darkness, wondering if it marked me as free, or marked me as prey. I thought of Veyron's whisper, the smug curl of his lip. A leash made of paper, but a leash all the same. Sleep would not come. The house was quiet, but in the silence, I felt the weight of expectation pressing harder than any chain. Tomorrow, the trial of obedience would begin. And somewhere out there, in the shadowed streets, I knew Veyron was already planning his next move. The town square bustled the next morning, but the usual chatter seemed muted when Mistress and I stepped outside. People turned their heads, some offering cautious smiles, others looking away as though contact itself might draw them into scandal. Children whispered behind their mothers' skirts. I clutched the basket to my chest, walking close to Mistress, my steps small and careful. The ruling had traveled fast, faster than the dawn. Already, posters had appeared, written in elegant ink, announcing that the maid of Mistress Alira was on probationary liberty. Words like probationary carried a heavy weight. They didn't say freedom. They said suspicion, test, warning. Mistress kept her chin high, ignoring the stares. But I noticed how her grip on my arm tightened. She, too, felt the eyes. At the far edge of the square, leaning casually against the fountain, Veyron waited. His coat gleamed, his boots polished, and his smile as sharp as ever. He tipped his hat when we drew near. My favorite ward of the panel," he said smoothly, his eyes locking on me. "How well you wear your chains, even when dressed as ribbons." Mistress stiffened. "She is not your ward." The ruling was clear.
Clear, yes.
But also conditional. He tapped the rolled parchment in his hand. 6 months, my dear Alira. 6 months in which she must prove herself. And what if she falters? What if she stumbles while carrying that basket, or fails to curtsy at the proper depth, or lets her eyes wander when they should lower? The town is watching, and I, he spread his arms, am only here to ensure fairness. His words dripped with poison. Fairness, from his lips, sounded like a threat. Mistress pulled me away, but as we passed, he leaned closer, whispering so only I could hear. "Every mistake will belong to me. And I promise you, little maid, I have patience enough to wait for the smallest one." The rest of the market blurred. I barely remembered buying the bread or the cloth. My mind clung to his words, replaying them like an echo that wouldn't fade. Every mistake will belong to me. That night, I asked Jonah, half desperate, half trembling, what if I couldn't be perfect? What if I slipped, even once? Jonah's face hardened. "Then we'll fight. You hear me? We'll fight him, no matter what it costs." His voice shook, not with fear, but with the burden of knowing how great that cost might be. But Mrs. Kettle, listening from her corner, only shook her head. "It is not perfection that will save her," she said softly. "It is grace. Grace in the face of malice. Grace when even perfection is twisted into fault. Remember that, child. Grace can make shadows stumble." I wanted to believe her, yet in my heart, I felt the weight of Veyron's gaze even through the walls of the house. He was watching, waiting, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he struck, not with gold this time, but with whispers, rumors, and traps. The days that followed were a blur of duties, each one sharper, heavier, more delicate than before. Mistress's instructions grew exacting, every task measured against an invisible standard. When I dusted the shelves, she inspected them with a finger. When I polished the brass, she tilted it to the lamplight, searching for the faintest streak. "You must leave no room for fault," she repeated, her voice firm but trembling beneath the surface. "He is watching. He is waiting." And indeed, Veyron was everywhere. He appeared in the square, leaning on his cane as though merely strolling. He lingered at the edge of the courtyard when I fetched water from the well. He even tipped his hat when I glanced from the upstairs window, as if to remind me that eyes were always on me, whether I looked for them or not. Mistress bore the weight heavily. She snapped at Jonah more than once, scolding him for things she would have once overlooked, mud tracked in, tools left scattered. She moved through the house like a taut bowstring, ready to snap. One evening, as I set the table, she dropped into her chair with a sigh. The candlelight deepened the shadows under her eyes. "Do you know what they said to me today?" she asked bitterly. "That perhaps I am unfit to keep you. That perhaps I lack the discipline to guide such delicate responsibility." Her hands clenched into fists. "It is Veron's doing," he whispers in their ears. "He poisons every glance, every word." I tried to speak, to reassure her, but my voice faltered. Could I promise her I would never err? Could I claim I would not falter under the crushing eyes of the town? The truth clung heavy on my tongue. I was only human, wearing a role stitched onto me, fragile as lace. Jonah, sitting across the table, slammed his palm down. "Let him whisper. Let them doubt. We'll show them. We'll show every last one of them she's not weak, not broken, not his to claim." His voice burned with passion, but Mistress only shook her head. "You don't understand, Jonah. They don't need truth. They only need suspicion. And suspicion grows faster than truth ever can." The room fell silent. Only the crackle of the fire spoke, and even that seemed to echo with unease. Later that night, as Mistress retired, I heard her weeping softly through the door. She had fought so hard to win me, but now the victory threatened to break her. And though my heart ached for her, a darker fear whispered inside me. What if Veron wasn't merely breaking me, but breaking her, too? Jonah was never one to sit quietly while injustice grew. The tension in Mistress's house had wound itself around him like rope, pulling tighter with every passing day. I could see it in the way he paced the courtyard, fists clenched, or how his eyes followed every passerby with suspicion. He hated feeling powerless. And more than that, he hated seeing me weighed down by Veron's shadow. One evening, after supper, he pulled me aside to the workshop, where the lamplight flickered against the sawdust and tools. His voice was low, urgent. "I can't stand it any longer. He's poisoning everything. Mistress, the town, it's all part of his game. So I'm going to end it." My stomach dropped. "End it?
How?"
He leaned closer, his hands braced on the workbench. "By exposing him. People worship his gold, his words, but gold doesn't shine without dirt underneath. There's rot there, I know it. Deals, debts, secrets. If I can find them, bring them into the light, he'll lose his grip." I shook my head frantically. "Jonah, no. He's too powerful. He has eyes everywhere. If you challenge him openly, he'll turn them all against you." Jonah gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "He already has them against me. Against all of us. What difference does it make if I fight back?" But his eyes softened when they met mine. "I'm not doing this just for Mistress. I'm doing it for you. You deserve more than living like a bird in a cage, waiting for the cat to strike." I wanted to protest, to beg him to stop, but the words tangled in my throat. There was something in his voice, something that told me no plea could turn him aside. That night, after the house had gone quiet, I saw him slip out the side door, coat pulled tight, his step silent as a shadow. I pressed my face to the cold window glass, watching his figure vanish into the lamplit streets. Fear knotted in my chest. Jonah was walking straight into danger, and I could do nothing but pray that his courage would not lead him into Veron's waiting hands. The morning after Jonah disappeared into the night, the house was restless. Mistress scolded me twice for things I hadn't done wrong, her hands trembling as she set down her cup. I wanted to tell her where Jonah had gone, but the promise I'd made to him bound my tongue. Fear sat like a stone in my chest. Mrs. Kettle arrived mid-morning, her basket on her arm as always, her shawl wrapped tight. She took one look at Mistress's drawn face, another at mine, and then set her basket down with a thud. "Enough of this," she said sharply. her voice stronger than I had ever heard. "We are letting him win without lifting a finger." Mistress blinked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Kettle drew herself up, her back straight, her eyes blazing with something fierce. "Veron thinks he owns the whispers of this town, but I have lived here longer than his gold has shown. These people trust me, and they will listen if I speak. I will not let him twist every tale into poison while we cower indoors." Before Mistress could argue, Mrs. Kettle was already at the door, her shawl fluttering like a banner. I rushed after her, clutching at her sleeve. "Please, if you speak against him, he'll come after you." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both tenderness and iron. "Child, I am an old woman. I have nothing left he can take from me. No riches, no pride, no power. But I do have a voice, and I will use it." True to her word, she marched straight to the square. I trailed behind, my heart pounding, as she climbed the fountain steps where Veron often leaned. Her voice rose, clear and steady, cutting through the market's hum. "You've all heard the whispers: probation, suspicion, fragility. But do not forget what you have also seen. You have seen this girl serve with dignity, kindness, and obedience. You have seen Mistress Alira fight not for herself, but for justice. And you know me. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever led you astray? If I say she is worthy, then by heaven she is worthy." The crowd murmured, heads turning, brows furrowed. Some nodded. Others frowned, unsure. But for the first time, I saw doubt flicker not in us, but in Veron's hold over them. From the shadows near the tavern door, I caught the flash of his eyes, sharp and narrow. He had not expected Mrs. Kettle to rise. He had not expected her to stand tall against him. When we returned home, she clasped my hands warmly. "Courage, child," she whispered. "Even the smallest candle can drive back the dark." Her words lit something in me I hadn't felt since the verdict. Perhaps, just perhaps, we were not as helpless as Veron wanted us to believe. The days after Mrs. Kettle's speech were different. People in the square no longer stared only with suspicion. Some offered small smiles, others gave quiet nods as I passed. It was not victory, but it was a shift, a tiny crack in Veron's wall. But he was quick to strike back. 2 days later, a messenger arrived at Mistress's house bearing a sealed summons. The parchment was heavy, the ink fresh. Mistress read it aloud, her lips tightening as she spoke. "The maid is to appear before the panel for a demonstration of conduct and obedience." My heart stopped. A demonstration? Before the panel? It was as though every chore, every bow, every word I spoke at home was now to be paraded under watchful eyes. Mistress paced the room, furious. "This is his doing. He's turned probation into performance. They want to test you like an animal at market." Jonah had not yet returned, and his absence weighed on me. Without his defiance, without his reckless bravery, the house felt hollow. Still, Mrs. Kettle placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Then we prepare. Not with fear, but with grace." The day of the test, the hall was filled not only with the panel but also with townsfolk, curious and hungry for spectacle. Veron sat among them, his smirk polished, his cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. I was called forward. A hush fell. They asked me to perform simple tasks, pouring tea, folding linens, reciting the duties of a maid. Simple, yes, but under so many eyes my hands trembled, my voice quivered. Every mistake, I knew, would be Veron's triumph. At one point, as I set the tea before the registrar, my sleeve caught the edge of the saucer. It wobbled, clinked, nearly tipped. Gasps rose from the crowd. My breath caught in my throat. For a heartbeat, the world froze. But then Mrs. Kettle's words echoed in my mind. "Grace can make shadows stumble." I steadied the saucer with both hands, bowed lower, and spoke softly. "Forgive my clumsiness. I shall be more careful." The registrar nodded, sipping the tea without comment. The panel scribbled notes. When it ended, I felt drained, my knees weak. The panel dismissed me without verdict, their expressions unreadable. Veron's smirk lingered, sharper than ever, as if he had seen enough to twist against me. But as we left, a few townsfolk whispered encouragements. She did well. Better than I expected. A woman even pressed my hand and said, "Don't let him break you." It wasn't victory, not yet. But perhaps it was proof that even under the cruelest scrutiny, I could still stand, still serve, still carry myself with dignity. And for the first time, I realized the test was not only theirs. It was mine, to decide who I was and whether I could bear the weight of this strange, fragile freedom. The demonstration had ended, but its ripples spread quickly. By the following morning, the town was alive with talk. Some said I had proven myself. Others insisted my near slip with the saucer showed weakness. And at the heart of every rumor was Veyron, fanning the flames with a well-placed word or a tilted smile. Mistress returned from the registry with news that made her hands shake. "He's filed a motion with the council," she said bitterly. "He's arguing that the terms of your probation should be made stricter, that you should not only serve in my household but also in the community, under their eyes, so they may judge your worth daily." The word struck me like cold water. To be paraded through the town as a servant to all, every move watched, every misstep magnified, it was a new cage, gilded with the word fairness. Jonah had still not returned, and his absence felt heavier by the day. Mistress pressed her palms to her temples. "If they grant him this, he'll own the narrative. He'll make you stumble in public where whispers spread fastest." Mrs. Kettle, calm as ever, stirred her tea and said, "Then perhaps the town should see more than just his whispers. Perhaps they should see the truth with their own eyes." But Mistress shook her head. "They don't want truth, they want spectacle. And he knows it." That evening, I ventured into the square with Mistress, and there was Veyron again, as though he had been waiting. He held a folded document in his hand, the council's seal glinting in the lamplight. "Good evening, my little probationer," he said smoothly. "I trust your duties are keeping you humble. You'll be pleased to know the council will vote tomorrow. A fair chance, don't you think? For everyone to see you in service, to prove you belong to this role." Of course, he leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "Every eye is another trap, and you will never be perfect enough to please them all." Mistress pulled me away, fury burning in her eyes. But his words clung to me like smoke. The idea of serving not just her, but all of them, every glance a test, every smile a judgment, made my knees tremble. That night, I sat awake by the window, staring into the darkness. Somewhere, Jonah was out there, searching for a way to fight him. Mrs. Kettle was planning her quiet resistance. Mistress was fraying under the strain. And me, I felt caught in the center of a storm, with Veyron tightening the winds around us. The council would decide tomorrow, and their decision could make the next 6 months either bearable or unbearable. The council chamber was packed tighter than I had ever seen it. Every bench filled, every wall lined with townsfolk eager to watch the spectacle. The air buzzed with whispers, half expectation, half curiosity. Mistress walked beside me, her face pale but resolute. Mrs. Kettle followed close behind, her basket clutched in both hands. And still, Jonah was nowhere to be found, his absence carved a hollow in my chest. At the front of the chamber, the council members sat in a row, robes heavy, faces grave. Between them and us stood Veyron, coat shining, cane gleaming, his expression calm and victorious, as though the verdict was already written. He bowed with practiced elegance. "Honorable counselors," he began, his voice rich and smooth, "I come not as an enemy of this girl, but as a servant of order." The panel's ruling was wise, yet incomplete. Probationary liberty, yes, but liberty without constant measure is dangerous. I propose, therefore, that she serve not only in Mistress Alira's home, but also in the homes of this community. Let all bear witness to her obedience, her humility, her worthiness. If she proves herself, let her freedom stand. If she falters, then order demands her claim return to me. A wave of murmurs swept the chamber. Some nodded, impressed by his rhetoric. Others frowned uneasily. Mistress rose at once, her voice sharp with anger. "This is no proposal of fairness. It is enslavement by another name. She is not a spectacle to parade for your entertainment, nor a pawn to fatten one man's pride. She has already proven her worth, in service, in dignity, in grace. Veron's smile widened slightly. Grace that wobbles at the tilt of a saucer. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, and heat rushed to my face. But before Mistress could reply, Mrs. Kettle stepped forward, her old voice carrying more power than I'd ever heard. And yet she steadied it. She stumbled, yes, but with humility. Tell me, which is truer strength, the man who never errs, or the one who falters and rises again? The chamber stilled. For a heartbeat, even the counselors looked at her with something like respect. Then, from the back of the hall, a voice rang out. And what of the man who buys obedience with gold and fear? Heads turned. My heart leapt. Jonah stood there, disheveled, eyes blazing, a bundle of papers clutched in his fist. He strode forward, laying the bundle on the council table with a thud. These are records of Veron's dealings, debts hidden, trades falsified, bribes paid. He speaks of order, but his order is built on lies. Let the council see who truly threatens this town's dignity. Gasps filled the chamber. Veron's mask cracked, just for an instant, his jaw tightening, his cane tapping harder against the floor. The counselors bent over the papers, their brows furrowed, whispers passing between them. The tide of the room shifted, the crowd murmuring now with doubt instead of admiration. For the first time, I saw Veron's shadow flicker. The chamber held its breath. The counselors leaned over the bundle of papers Jonah had delivered, their eyes scanning line after line. The silence was so sharp I could hear the rustle of every turning page. Mistress stood tall beside me, her hand lightly resting on my shoulder, a quiet anchor against the storm. At last, the eldest counselor lifted her gaze. These records, if true, reveal corruption of the highest order. Master Veron, you stand accused of deceit and manipulation. Do you deny these charges? Veron's lips curled, but his usual calm was gone. His voice rang sharp, brittle. Forge. Lies, all of it. This boy seeks to destroy me because he cannot abide by law and order. Jonah stepped forward, eyes burning with defiance. I seek only to destroy chains that bind the innocent. These documents are not forged, they are witnessed, signed, sealed. Ask the merchants whose names are written there. Ask the families he has bled dry. You will find truth enough. The crowd shifted like a tide, whispers becoming shouts. Check the records. I knew it. He's no master, he's a thief. Mistress's voice cut through the noise, calm and strong.
This is not only about him.
It is about her. She gestured toward me, and suddenly every eye in the chamber was upon me. My knees trembled, but I stood straight. I am not perfect, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I stumble, I drop, I falter. But I rise again. I serve because I must, but also because I choose to. Not as a slave, not as a spectacle, but as myself. If you would see obedience, then see also the courage it takes to be small and still stand tall. If I am to be judged, let it be for the truth of my heart, not the lies of his. The room erupted, not in jeers, but in applause. Hands clapping, voices calling. My face burned, not with shame this time, but with a strange pride that felt like sunlight. The counselors conferred briefly, then the eldest rose once more. The council has decided. The probation stands, but under Mistress Alira's guardianship alone. The girl is free to serve, to learn, to grow, without interference. And as for Master Veron, her eyes hardened. An investigation shall begin at once. Until it concludes, he is stripped of his privileges and confined to his estate. The chamber roared. Veron's face blanched, then darkened, but the guards were already moving toward him. He slammed his cane against the floor, eyes locking on mine one last time, full of venom. This is not over.
His voice was a hiss.
You think you've won, little maid, but shadows run deep, and I will not fall so easily. As he was led away, the hall erupted with cheers. Mistress embraced me tightly, her eyes wet. Mrs. Kettle pressed a handkerchief into my palm. Jonah grinned, breathless, but triumphant. For the first time, I felt not like a burden, nor a spectacle, but like someone real, someone seen. And yet, as the cheers filled my ears, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. His words lingered, heavy, poisonous. This battle was over. But the war for my freedom, for my place in this world, was only beginning.